Hey, this is Seth Parnell, minister at the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 165 of Midweek Bible Study. Hope everything is going well for you. Hope you're doing good. I want to let you know that we appreciate you being here, and hope you've had a pretty good day today. I know it's been nice weather outside, and so if you'll be able to get out and enjoy it, that can be a good thing. But so glad that you're here with us tonight. But as we always do, we want to give you a invitation to join us at Portia if you're in the local area. Right now we are at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. We are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, 5 o'clock on Sunday night, and 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. And so if you're in the area, please feel free to come by and see us. We would love to see you, love to talk with you, and be able to worship with you. It's always good in order to meet new brothers and sisters in Christ and be able to worship with them. And so if you're in the local area, hopefully you can come see us sometime. Also, if you have any suggestions, if you have any um, requests, like for topics or for passages for us to cover, then send those our way as well. We would love to hear from you, love to hear what you think, and maybe we can do one that will be beneficial to you. But just know that is something that is available to you. You can just get in contact with me any way that you can, and we'll take a look at it. But appreciate everyone being here tonight, just like Jackie Henry. Hope you're doing well. Hope everything is going your way. We appreciate you being here tonight. But we're going to continue a discussion tonight that we had last week on Exodus, chapter 16. Last week, and we took a look at this chapter in the book of Exodus that described a fantastic miracle that took place. A miracle, that was on a scale that we had never seen before. It was on a massive scale, one of the longest running miracles to ever take place in the Bible. God was someone who provided, for Israel by giving them what was called, manna, and what they later referred to as, manna. And this was a kind of a white, flaky, substance. It was like coriander seed, as the Bible describes. I think it's in verse 31. It describes it in that way, and they could grind it up, they could make it into a flour, and they could, be someone who could eat like a wafer or a bread, from this, thing that fell from the sky. And so God, he provided, for them in this way so that they could, make this journey, throughout the wilderness and to the promised land. And it's something that it continued to fall for years and years. This was not something that just took place, one day or one night, but there were people, who were probably born around this time, who that's all they knew. They knew that manna fell from the sky, every day. They went and picked it up. That's all they knew, and which is, kind of interesting to think about just how long this miracle, lasted, just how long it took place. But rather, it indeed, was something that God put in place so that He could, guide Israel to where they needed to be, so He could guide them to, that promised land. And so we kind of looked at some of the cases in which how you can approach, like when you can to rewind, we took a look at giving a complaints and bringing up grievances in a respectful way and in a good way, something that the children of Israel did not do here in this case. As you know, it said that they grumbled against Moses and Aaron and said, "Have you brought us out here in order to kill us? Have you brought us out here in order to starve us to death?" And they started to remember all of the food they had back in Egypt and all the vegetables and the meat, and selectively left out, the part of which they were in slavery. But they said, back in Egypt, we had all these things, but you've led us out here and there's nothing. So Moses, what are you going to do about this? How are you going, to solve this? And so they had they had a not a great perspective when it came to facing adversity, when it came to facing, rough things. Because sometimes, we as people, sometimes that's one of the easiest things to do, is to pass on, the responsibility, to pass on the obligation to solve a problem, to someone else, and then, kind of pass the blame to them as to why, this problem hasn't been solved. Because as these people, as the children of Israel, what they didn't do was, they didn't say, well, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to, get food? What are we going to do in order to, make this happen? Instead, they looked to Moses, and they sent out their complaint, and they just put all the blame, on Moses, as far as, who was responsible, for this. And that, of course, was the wrong way in order to approach, this situation. But Moses, he is getting kind of frustrated with them for good reason, as he does many times, throughout the Exodus journey. But God's going to give them some very specific instructions on how to approach this and what to do with this manna that was going to come from heaven. And so we have I believe in verse 22. Yeah, and that's where we're going to start here, taking a look at this. And on verse 32, is he's going to give them some, like I said, some specific instructions. He's going to tell them how to do this and what's going to happen if they, fail to do this, if they don't, follow the instructions. Verse 22 says, on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much food, 2 omers apiece. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, this is what the Lord had commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake, and boil what you want to boil, and all that's left over put aside to be kept until morning. So they put aside until morning, just as Moses had commanded them, and it did not rot, and there were no maggots in it. And Moses said, eat it today, for today is the Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, there will be none. And so, they were told, here in the previous, verses, that the manna was going to fall, for, 6 days. You think of, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's going to fall, it's going to fall for, like I said, for 6 days. But on the last day, they were to gather twice as much. They were to gather, twice as much, and then keep, what was left over for the Sabbath. So they wouldn't have to go out and gather up, manna on the Sabbath day and break the Sabbath, in order to eat. And so that they wouldn't have to do that. But because they were told, on other occasions, they were told to not, only gather what you need, only gather what you're going to eat for that day, and no more. And as we see, there was a lot of Israelites who didn't listen, to instructions. They didn't listen to what they were told, and they gathered more than they needed, and it says that it rotted and it started to stink, and it was not a pleasant, situation. But it was it was definitely clear. But sometimes we have difficulty following, as a people. We have difficulty following instructions, sometime. But God gives us instructions for a reason. He gives us, these standards and these, commands and all these things, for a reason. God wants what's best, for us. God wants us to be faithful. He wants us to have, that salvation, for us. And so to act in the way that He has provided, for us, God's not going to force this on us. He's not going to, force us to act in a certain way or force us, to make, certain decisions. But if we do follow God's command, if we do follow His standard, it's going to go pretty well for us. It's going to turn us into the best possible version of ourselves, that we can be. Because It won't, it won't make you rich. It won't make you famous. It won't give you any of those things that our society values so highly. But some of those deeper virtues that you think of in people that you respect. You think of, people who are loving. You think of people who are courageous. You think of people, who are kind, who are forgiving, who look out for those who are more unfortunate. Those who are bear, one another's burdens. You think of all those things that those people do. God has called us, to be that person, to live in that manner. It doesn't mean we're going to be perfect, but it does mean, that we're called to do something higher than just serving ourselves here, on this earth. And so we know that God's given us a command, for a reason and for a purpose. And so if we follow it, it's going to change us for the better. But God's never going to force us to do anything, because that's not who He is. He is a loving God. Good to see Farrell here. Hope that you are doing well. He says Keith Mosier Sr. was teaching this and stopped and suggested we get a collection together to purchase boxes of Kleenexes to send over to modern Israel. He is implying that they were whining. Yeah, they and this is not the first time that they were doing this, and so if they had some Kleenexes back then, I bet they would go through quite a bit, because this wasn't the attitude that they had. And as I say, we can learn from the good examples in the Bible, and we can learn from the bad examples as well. There's a lot of characters in the Bible story, just like human life, just like normal, everyday occurrences. As we know, the Bible is not a storybook, but it's history of real life things that have happened. And so, and because of that, you have people in the Bible who make questionable decisions, who make the wrong decision, who do things that make you scratch your head and be like, why didn't you see this, or why didn't you do it this way? And so we have the good and the bad recorded for us in the Bible. And so we can, if we learn from the good examples that we have, we can emulate those positive qualities, and we can look at the bad examples and we can try to avoid those qualities that they produce. And we won't have to purchase as many Kleenexes maybe as is this case. But we can be someone who, like I said, who learns from both. There's a reason why all these stories are in the Bible. They're here for a reason, as we say, and we can learn from all of them. And especially with Israel here, as we kind of look at last week, when we're bringing these problems that we have, when we're speaking about these issues that are going on, there's a good way to go about it, and there's a not so good way to go about it. We can either try to solve the problem, or we can make the problem worse. And we want to solve it. We want to do things that are to the benefit of everybody. And so we don't want to follow the example of Israel here. But there's a reason why they did this, because you think about it, which is easier, complaining about the leadership of someone else, or taking personal responsibility and charging ahead and trying to solve, doing what you can to help in a problem. It's a whole lot easier to just assign blame to something and say, it's your fault, that's the problem, and I have nothing to do with it. That's very easy to do, and a lot of people do it today, and it's very, very easy to do. But it's a whole different thing. It's a lot harder when you say, if they were to go up to Moses and say, Moses, I'm worried about there not being enough food. What can I do to help? What can I do to assist you? Or what's our path forward? They could have said that. They could have done that. But instead, they come up to Moses, and they whine about how good it was back in Egypt compared to where Moses had led them now. And so that's an example that I think that we can learn from. here in this case. Because as people, we have to take, personal responsibility, for the things, that we do. And there's a lot of things that are out of our control. There's a lot of things that, we can't solve, on our own. Like, you look at the bigger problems that our, society is facing. You look at some of the bigger issues out there. I mean, if we could, solve those, if a lot of us could solve those, we would. We would, go at it in a heartbeat. But there's a lot of things that are out of our control. But we can still, do what we can in our own space and in our own, sphere. We can do what we can in order to help with that problem, in order to solve, that issue. Doesn't mean we're going to, solve all the problems of the world and you get everything, in a neat, neat little order. But we do what we can, with what we have. And if we are doing what we can, then that means that we have, we can be, satisfied, with our approach, to this. And we can't, and we're not just, assigning blame to some, either an idea or to a person or to something, out there, in order to, avoid, the consequences, for ourselves. And I've done that before. I've said, well, it's, because of this. But when I take a hard look at saying, well, have I really been doing what I can do in order to, help with this? And in passing, that answer was no. And so we do need to. There's some things, we do need to stand up for. We do need to be strong on. But we need to be careful about just, assigning blame here and there, or saying, this is, the source of the problem. That's nothing to do with me. Because if we do that, we can run into problems pretty quickly, as Israel found out here. As Pharaoh also says, he says, so true. And that we also got Nancy here. Hope that you are doing well. It's good to see you here with us tonight. But like I said, they were given, these instructions here, and they were told, on this last day, you go out, you get this manna, and you get twice as much as you normally would, and then that will pull you over here to the Sabbath. But there was a couple of cases in which, they messed up. The Israelites. There's some Israelites who went out there, on the Sabbath, and they were wondering, where it was. Some of them kept, too much, and so they were doing, these things, that Moses told them. This is what God has told you to do, and this is what you need to do, and this is why you're not going to keep these things past when you should. And so when you look at the instructions that God has given us, and the good things that He has provided for us, and as I mentioned before, when we take a look at things such as forgiveness. Forgiveness is something that is a very highly valued virtue. It's something that is important to a Christian. It's something that we are the beneficiaries of in a big way when we see the forgiveness of God and how He forgives us, and all the things that we do and all the mistakes that we make. God still forgives us. But even if there wasn't that element of that, even if there wasn't you'll forgive and you will be forgiven, even if there wasn't that element of that, being a person who forgives, being a person who tries to mend relationships, that how much better is that for a person and the relationships that you have? If you're someone who is forgiving, if you're someone who is willing to go the extra mile in order to look out for someone, or to mend a relationship, or to bear a burden, or to love your neighbor as yourself. The relationships that you will have in life will be so much better than if you're someone who holds grudges and burns bridges, and being someone who lets pride separate you from what would normally be a good relationship with a person. Being just even from a secular sense, being someone who is forgiving is good for a person. It can help a person have the more good friendships and relationships, and better ones in that sense. But even when you add the spiritual element into it, we know that whenever we come, we approach things from a humble point of view. We know that God has given us this path to salvation. It's not something that we've earned, so we don't really have the authority to put it on anyone else and point fingers. But we what God gives us is for our benefit, and it helps us avoid some of those mistakes that we would otherwise make. If they had listened to what Moses had said here, God was speaking through Moses, they would have avoided some of those mistakes that they had made. But as we know, God's instructions are for our benefit, and that can go through a number of things here as well. But always remember that that God, He gives us what we need in order to get through. Well, let's continue on here. We'll run out of time here pretty quick. But in verse 27, it says, "On the seventh day, some of the peoples went out to gather, and they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. There on the sixth day He gives you food for 2 days. Each of you stay where you are. Do not leave your place on the seventh day." So the people rested on the seventh day. And the Israelites called it manna. It was like white coriander seed, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. And Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations, in order that they may see the food which I fed you in the wilderness, and when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations, just as the Lord commanded Moses." So Aaron placed it before the covenant for safekeeping. And the Israelites ate manna 40 years until they came to a habitable land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. An omer is a tenth of an ephah. And so we find them here, as He gave them instructions. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them, didn't listen, and they had to get reprimanded by Moses here in this case. But they were also told, in order to take some of that manna and preserve it and set it up so that it can be, as He says here in verse 32, let it be kept throughout the generations, so they may see the food that I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. Like I said, this would take place. This miracle would take place, over 40 years, and so there would be people that would know this, for most of their life. But Moses still said, preserve some of this, to be kept, so that other generations, beyond will know what happened here and know how God had provided, for the people, and how He led the people and He provided for the people, and He eventually, got them where they needed, to be. And God is someone who is continually a provider. He's continually a leader. He guides people. And when He took, the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, even though they didn't go the expected route, they didn't go the traditional route, even though it took them a lot longer to get there than they probably thought. But yet God took them, and helped them to grow and helped them to get where they needed, to be. And sometimes we need to be reminded of just the provisional nature of God and just of the blessings, that God, gives, because it's pretty easy, to forget. It's very easy, to forget about these things. And so when you read about, when you read throughout the Bible and you read things such as, the 10 plagues, when you read about, the parting of the Red Sea, when you read about the Battle of Jericho, when you read about, these, David, facing, the giant, you think about all these things that, take place, in the Bible story. You think of Jesus feeding the 5,000, of healing, the lame man, the all these, wonderful things that take place. This is, the God, that we serve. This is the God, that we, are are looking to, that we, worship. Sometimes we need to be reminded of just, who, God is, and what he has done for people in the past, and what he has promised us, for the future. That can be, very, very encouraging when you read about, these things, because that's not, someone that is different. The same God that parted that Red Sea, that's who we serve. That's the power, that he has. And so it's easy to forget that. It's easy to kind of diminish that in our mind, and not just realize just how powerful and how big, our God is. But we need to be reminded, sometimes. And Moses, knew this, and so he wanted them to be reminded of just how God had provided for, the children of Israel. Because if God provided for them in the past, if he provided for them then, what's that going to say about the future? God's still going to provide for them, in the future. And like I said, they still had to go out, and they still had to gather it. They still had to, bake it. They had to process it. They still had to store it. And they still had to observe the instructions that God had given them. So it wasn't, just, handed to them. In that case, they still had to take the initiative and, go out and gather it for themselves. God still requires of us, in order to do what is required of us, to be obedient, to live according to that standard, to do those things that are becoming, of a Christian. We're called to do, those things. There's a as you mentioned earlier, there's a responsibility of our own, in order to, do some of these, to do some of these good things. But God is still a provider. And when we had the problem of sin, God gave us a way out. He gave us a way to salvation. And God is someone who always, puts us in where we need to be. And so if you're someone who is looking to get to heaven, if you want to be in heaven, if you want to have those promises that he has given us, God has given us a way there. And he has given us, the path, forward. All we have to do is, go out and be obedient and take charge of what he has given us. And so they needed to be reminded, of, the love of God, of the, the nature of providing for them. And so they set that up, for them as well. But there's a lot of great things that we could, take a look at this, and that we could, observe, from this case. As we know, you can, let me know what you think about, in the comments, later on. And we might go back in next week. We might go back and take a look at a few comments that we had on this video. But just remember that we serve a big God. And it's upon us, in order to not squander that gift that he has given us, but trust that God will do his part if we, do our part. And if we can live a life, of love, and we can be someone who is, obedient, to the God who created this universe and who parted the Red Sea, we know that things are going to be good, and things are going to be all right for us. And we can move forward, with goodness. I think that's all we're going to have here, for, tonight. And so hope that you have a wonderful day. And we will be back here next week, for another episode. It'll be episode 166, I believe. And so I hope you can join us then. We would love to have you, and love to be able to study with you. And like I said before, if you have any comments, or any like to put in your 2 cents about what we study here tonight, please feel free to put those in after the video ends, and we want to take a look at them later on. But until then, I hope that you go out and be the light of the world and glorify God in everything that you do. Catch you next time.